I'm here with Søren Nagbøl, who is an emeritus professor for sociology. And yes, we are on our series of reflections on Norbert Elias. Since when did you know Norbert Elias?
I know him personally from 1976-7. I know his book before. I have been read it in Denmark before I go to Frankfurt in 75 or that. He became a name in Denmark before I come to Frankfurt, and I was very surprised that he suddenly were in Frankfurt. So why I know him from his book, I go to his first lecture in Frankfurt since 43 years.
Wow.
And that was a amazing experience because it was totally different what I ever have been seen in a university. This personality, this old man, as I was sitting in the audience and look at the book, I think maybe it is his son. But exactly 1:15, an old man in Burberry go to the podium, as has he been making lectures there every day the last years, took over the microphone and said, "I'm very happy that I again can make lectures in Frankfurt." And the audience was in explosions. He was been taken very welcome home. "We have been waiting for you." And then Elias was starting to make his program about psychoanalytic research, Marxistic, and the way he had combined that to civilization's process. And that was a very, very, very interesting experience.
Wow.
So I was, first minute I was with him.
You were in this historic moment where he returned more than 40 years later.
Yes.
And you came from Denmark, from Copenhagen.
Yes.
You had begun studying sociology, and you came as a young sociology student.
Yes. I was studying history of ideas and philosophy, and was interested in the Frankfurter school and the Marxist tradition, and in the psychoanalytic tradition in the way that was made in Frankfurt, especially by Alfred Lorenzer. But the team Elias had announced in his studies, that was my team. I was interested to make this combination, so I have a little bit of knowledge about it, but the way he was presenting his knowledge was different to Habermas, Alfred Smith, Micheli, and Lorenzer. There was more sensibility, there was more lived life in the way Elias was telling his way of making research, and that was what have so a big effect on me as a student. I was at that time 30 years and he was 80, and today I'm 80, and therefore it's 50 years ago, but this experience are sitting very strong in me, and it was the way I was studying the rest of my life. It was this moment of being in the right seminar that was the way I later learned to come to new knowledge that I could combine with my own life and the way of the books. But it was the experience of the human being represented by the living Norbert Elias that was the way, my way of being a sociologist. So I go, after I have been knowing Elias, away from history of ideas and philosophy, as he said to me, "Søren, you can't be knowing knowledge as a philosopher, you have to be a sociologist." So therefore I was changing. I make my PhD in philosophy and history of ideas, but I changed and make also a PhD in sociology in Copenhagen. So the way I was changing my orientation in life of human being and knowledge was going from philosophy, critical theory, to sociology in the Norbert Elias way, with the terms figurations and long-term processes and psycho- and sociogenetic way of looking at the world, and the new terms habitus, affect modulation, and so on. That was the way I was changed. I was changed not only in my mind, but also in my body, in my habitus, and the way I've been looking at the world. That was the way I was looking at the world. There I learned from the personal relationship to Norbert Elias, because we was later becoming friends. So I was walking with him through Frankfurt, and all the knowledge was going when we were speaking with each other, when we was walking, not so much in the colloquium or in the seminar, but it was a personal way of exchange human knowledge.
How did you come to walking with him through Frankfurt from being in a seminar? I think there were 100 people in it. And how did you catch his attention, or how did you come closer to him?
It was two things. I was not only in the lectures. I found out there was a German tradition of the colloquium, and there I got the address. And there was sitting very few people, and some students and famous scientists of the Frankfurter School, and I was there with my girlfriend, and I was very impressed from the way he was managed this colloquium. That was a Frankfurter way. I think it was a way that was made in the 70s with the student revolt, but it was a part of doing that from the 30s, and there I learned Elias' way of working and speaking. And one day we was walking from the seminar room downstairs to the street and floor. Elias was asking me, "How did you come to Frankfurt and study?" I said I was coming on my motorbike, and I said, "Do you was driving the whole way from Denmark to Frankfurt on the motorbike to study here?"
Yeah.
"Yes," I said. Then said Elias, "Okay, then I will be your supervisor."
Wow.
And that was the point. Then he told me that he was not very well in finding ways in Frankfurt because he was old, and sometimes he was going to a place where I don't know, and then I must call a taxi. So I gave him my phone number and said, "Elias, when you can find your way in Frankfurt, call me." And then he called me and then asked me, "Will you bring me from the hotel to the university, and from the university to the hotel when I'm being in Frankfurt?" Because he make lectures with 80 doubled in Bochum and in Frankfurt. And when he was in Frankfurt, he lived in Hotel Pelican. And I go to Hotel Pelican, and then we walk from Hotel Pelican through Frankfurt to the university. And after that, we was working from the university to not Pelican direct. We always go to Café Lauma, because Elias has sitting there in Café Lauma in the 30s, where they have the third seminar, where the professor was going out with the students. So he was sitting there with Mannheim, Ilse Seelow, Gisela Freund, and there was the free speak over coffee and cakes and wine. So I was a part, his only student that was following him to Café Lauma, and then he started telling about the time in Frankfurt and in the 30 years, and about Horkheimer, das war ein anderer Ebene, and so on. So we get very, at the beginning, we also very near connection to each other and very free. And I was so young and he was so old, but we have a free conversations. It could be different when he was speaking with Alfred Lorenzer or Troye. That was a little bit more formal, but between us it was very open and very free, and maybe it was also my Danish way to communicate. There was a bit difference as the people that was coming from Germany and had more respect from the professors. We have not the same form of respect. We was all saying do to each other in Denmark, even the politiker from different parties, but in Germany it was see and more formal way of speak with each other, and that means that we get this connection. And Alfred Elias then tell me he would help me with my PhD and so on, and he was in Frankfurt. He liked to visit us private at home. We have a little flat. So and I and Elias was visiting us there, and then he was telling us about architecture and how we could research and how we should behave us on the difference between sexes and all what he was in mind of his way of working. He was spoken out to us in this private sphere. And we was in that age Elias has when he must leave Frankfurt.
Yes, he left when he was in his 30s, and you were now in your 30s.
I was right. So there was so many different connections I couldn't see at that time, but 50 years later, when I'm thinking back, I can see that we have had the luck to meet each other on the right time.
Yes, you had your period where you needed orientation, and he needed someone to give orientation.
And he needs something to tell about his time in Frankfurt to a stranger.
Oh yeah.
I was a stranger. I was a young man on my way, and he was a young old man coming from his way of live. And there we was meeting in Frankfurt, and therefore we have this very fruitful connections. So it was a play, was like a film. It was fun and we laughing, and there was no academical way of speaking with each other. It was friends.
Yeah.
Also, when there was this big gap in ages, I had not the feeling that he was 80 and I was 30. And I remember one time I should call a taxi to Elias to come home. It was a wide way to go. Then he asked us, he would be very happy if we would walk with him through Frankfurt, because he loved Frankfurt in the night. So we were starting to walk with Elias through Frankfurt from Bornheim bis Bockenheim. Wow. And as we was going down the stairs in the flat where we have, he was go together with Tove, my wife or girlfriend, and then he said, "Oh, Tove, it is so strange. I have a feeling that I'm 17 and I'm 80, but that was the connection, that was the interaction, the transfer between us, that he had suddenly the feeling that he was not anymore 80, but he was in our age."
He returned, so to say, to his young age in mind by connecting to younger people.
Yes.
And you, I don't know how many people from foreign countries came to Frankfurt. Were you and your girlfriend outsiders, or were there many students from other countries as well?
There was students from other countries, French, Greek, and so on. And I was meeting them in the courses of languages, and there I have connections to all different people from different nations, and there I know a lot of the way they was studying. So Frankfurt was, in that way, a place that was very open against people from outside. Nick Koll, som beispiel, was from Greek. He was running away from the Oberst regime there. There was Oxenius, he was was coming from Chile. He was a big man there. There was, who was a friend of Allende. There was Davidson, he was a former partisan from the leader from the army and American war in Vietnam. So there was a lot of atmosphere of internationality and openness. It was not the German I know today. When I go to Frankfurt and visiting the people that was at that time students and open, they are yet now professors, and the atmosphere in Frankfurt is totally different. So this atmosphere of the whole world were here, and we could speak with all people, and we was very open. That has changed.
And Elias, he came into this, and he suddenly was a star, and everybody was attending. Hundreds of people coming to his lectures.
Yes.
And he was part of the city audience, and of course there was this enormous popularity of him becoming the first awardee of the Adorno Prize. How did you experience this stardom around Elias, which was probably the first stardom he ever experienced in his life?
Elias was known totally the way you were working in Frankfurt. Then he told me, when I go to the big lectures in Frankfurt, I was surprised. I was sitting old people there, old ladies. And that means Elias told me it had also been so in Frankfurt that the intellectual bourgeoisie was going to the lectures
of
on the
professors.
university in Frankfurt, and especially when what do we call berühmte oder the known people was coming, the people from the town that was a part of the university communication was going to the lectures.
Unusual, quite unusual.
And they were speaking with us. So there was sitting many people, about 50, 60, and people that have a job in the culture in Frankfurt, from Verlag, Surkamp or places. So that was an integrated part of the town around this professors. And there was also conferences in Frankfurt where they were inviting people from the whole Germany, Adorno conference, Benjamin conference, and so it was leading from Habermas and so. But we have a way to speak with each other as though we was knowing each other. So there was especially atmosphere and culture, and there Elias was home. And so he was in his behavior and the way of speaking exactly like Habermas and Lorenzer when we were sitting in the big audience and talking about Adorno or Benjamin or Marx or Horkheimer. So there was especially Frankfurter spirit.
And they were more or less in the center of this figuration, people like Alfred Lorenzer, Jürgen Habermas, and they were they in dialogue, or were they more or less different centers where students could go?
That was a dialogue, and I will also say that von Friedeburg was a very important person because he had been the minister, and he was then later had a influence of Institut für Sozialforschung. So he was also an aristocrat, but an open man. And so there was an aristocratical way of communicating from knowledge. It was not bürgerliche oder deutsche, wie das ist in Studien über die Deutschen. Das war ein ganz anderer Tradition, and it was from the Jüdish tradition. It was the money from Weil, and it was the money that was in Institut für Sozialforschung, and the first time where Jewish people in the 30s could have a free atmosphere in the university, and that means already of that time, women had a position and was equal in the discussion in the university, psychoanalytical women, and so on. Wife from Mannheim was a psychoanalytical wife. So there was a spirit where the relationship between men and women was very near to each other. Mitchell was married with Margaret Mitchell, and in that way, the way of making communication of knowledge was very free and aristocratic, open, and it was a pleasant atmosphere. In the way we were speaking with each other, and I think that has something to do with the psychoanalytic tradition, where you have learned to speak open.
And there was also some kind of intellectual competition of attracting people from the city audience, getting people in touch with you.
That was very important. And Hochheim had made it so that you have the lectures, you have the seminar, you have the colloquium, and you have the third seminar. And this setting as a way of communicate was going through the whole way of Goethe University. And that was, I have never met this way of being an intellectual and knowledge person in other countries and in other towns as in Frankfurt. It was different in Hanover, it was different in Copenhagen, and also different in Amsterdam or in Leicester. There was this special, and from this spirit, Elias was at home.
This was his place to be at this time. That was his
place. And he also said when he was going through the town, the time in Frankfurt were the best years in his life.
Wow.
So it was coming back to something he need.
And he was revitalized.
Yes.
And how did you experience this? This was the first time we worked together with Surkamp Publishing House, which then made a lot of his books possible. How was you incorporated in this dialogue? There was this famous introduction by Unselt, who was from the publishing house, and he began. Now the Civilizing book was published in a paperback, and it became transformed to be one of the major books of German sociology, or generally of German academic life at this time, and giving him a lot of push from this period, and this Adorno Prize award given in 1977. Didn't this come strange to you that out of nowhere, or did, as a relatively young man in your 30s, take this enormous?
I was a Dane. I'm not an author. German. So for me it was very exciting that the people were so, and I know the book, the paperback book, and I also know that was from Luchterhand. But from the atmosphere where I meet all these people, also by Frau Hus in the Bockenheimer Buchladen, there was also the atmosphere. But in the beginning, it was for me very excited that I have this job to follow Elias from the hotel and back. But in this 1 year or 1.5 year or longer, he told me when we was walking around about his relationship to Surkamp, das war der was heißt gewesen, der Unzel, und then he found out I got this Deutsche Akademische Austauschdienst Stipendium, so then I get a card. I was a special person.
You were a special person suddenly.
I get a card from DRD, understand that every person in Germany had to be nice against me. So when the police was coming in the student time, I took out my this was Führerschein that said, here I'm a Dart stipendiat. And then said, hello, Herr Nagbøl. And also had something to mean. So people was recognizing while the university was very interesting. So when I also was following Norbert Elias, that means that I became something from that when we were sitting on the bank and drink coffee and eating, and so we was seeing as a part when we was walking around from the falling. So that I have, when I see it today, maybe also of influence of the way people was behaving them to me. So that was interesting. So we get very early part of the inside Frankfurter tradition, and also Alfred Lorenzer and others was visiting us private. So we was as young Danes a part of the intellectual people in Frankfurt, and my wife Tove, she got a job as architect by Albert Speer Jr. So we got so many views of the life in Germany we haven't seen as we was going from Denmark to Germany. We want to learn the language and learn the tradition, but we get total under experience as we have thought.
Who left Frankfurt first, Norbert Elias, or did you first go from Frankfurt away?
Elias must go back to Bielefeld, but we have still the contact, telephone, and when I go back to Denmark and make my work in Aarhus, I was visiting Norbert Elias.
You stayed in touch by a telephone?
Telephone or in Bielefeld. He invited us as friends to Bielefeld, and he invited us together with the Hotsbroom and to meet Peter Gleichmann, der var circles there. So after I go back to Denmark, I was in contact with Norbert Elias over the telephone, and I was also visiting him in Amsterdam 2 months before he was died, because I called him. I was in Frankfurt and say, Elias, I want to see you. Then he said, it's not a good idea. I'm really very old now, he said, and I'm not speaking very well, and so on. And then I said, I want to see you before you die. He said, that's okay, he said. So that we make a time where you come to Amsterdam, and it should be Saturday, and so on, so on, so on. And then he said to me, Søren, please call me 1 or 2 days before. It will be very stupid if you go to Amsterdam, I'm not there anymore. Okay. And then I called him 2 days before, and said, how are you? He said, I'm very, very well. I have been in Italy and got a prize. And I forgot my shoes, so I was becoming the prize in pantoffel. So that was the last time we were sitting there and talking. And I haven't seen him for 2-3 years, but the atmosphere and the contact was the same as always. So that was a very happy way to say goodbye to this person that have had so big influence of my life.
And your academic career, in the meantime, proceeded. You wrote a doctoral thesis, and you became regular university employee.
I read all the things I should do, but I don't get any job.
You didn't get a job?
No, only so small jobs, stipendiums and visiting professors and so on, until I was 56, I got on the Danish University through a friend at professorship, assistant professorship, or associated professorship or so. But until that, I was going to different jobs in different institutions.
You were teaching sociology.
I got the same job as a professor, but it was not lebenslang or the whole
You didn't
life.
get tenure.
Yes. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and so on in different institutes.
Yeah.
But I always make the same.
And
it was literature or art.
You taught sociology, or what was your subject? What was your teaching?
I was teaching in socialisation theory, architecture, figuration sociology, modern culture, sport. Elias was also a sports science, so I could change my teams after the institution I was coming to, but I must change the way of teaching about it was in culture, or it was in sport, or it was in didactic and pedagogical. But overall, I could use the models I have learned in Frankfurt. So that was not a problem.
Okay. How was your connection with the people from around Norbert Elias, his assistants, or Jo Brautsblom, Hermann Korte? Did you have a very personal connection with him, but actually, do you had a connection with his environment, the people surrounding him at this time? How did this develop during his lifetime?
I have mostly private relationships to the people. Very early in my knowledge, my friendship to Elias, he was presenting me for Hotspur and Maria. So I learned them as I was a student, and I get then relationships to Peter Gleichmann, and in Hanover became a relationship to some of his students, Katja Birisch, and then after Elias was dead, I meet Erik on the first
At the funeral.
In Amsterdam, and he invited me to Leicester. So I was 2 months in Leicester by Erik. I should have been there 1 year, but my wife should have a child. So I must go home. So therefore my English is poor. I should have learned the English language, but I learned Erik and sport, and that was for me very nice. I like him really, and I took with Erik and Jason Hooch to seminars in Bielefeld where there was Elias section, and then I learned Menel and Cass Waters, and also the man from the man that was working with Baumann, the Englishman that was working with Baumann.
Okay.
Kilminster,
Richard Kilminster, yes.
He was also a nice person. And then I also, in the periphery, Korte, and then I got a professorship in Hamburg. Then I learned Mr. Ernst, but it was not the same connection as to Elias. It was different because we have another way to look at the things. It was not this near contact. It was more formal and more institutionalized.
Okay.
As it was.
And you were more informal. You were more on the side of Cass Wouters, informalization.
But he was very near to me, exactly in the same way as Elias. The other was more distant.
Okay.
Maria Hotspur was also very near
Yeah.
me. She was a very nice person. I like
think
her very much.
there was a split also between Jo Brautsblum and his wife Maria. She was a more warm and welcoming person, and he was more distant and more intellectual. Different temperament type.
Yes, and he was very nice but very distant. But Maria was speaking perfect German.
Yes,
she was coming from a Jewish. She was also, I think, in concentration camp.
And
so on. So she had another way to communicate with people. And Elias was also telling me, with Maria coming, so for me, very, very good. And I have also a near relationships to Maria after Elias was dead. More than to Jupp. There was more a very nice person, but formal. So.
Okay. And you have stayed in touch with Norbert Elias circles for conferences at some point, or did you get out of touch and you said, okay, I'm more or less teaching Norbert Elias here in you said you also was teaching in Norway and now you're teaching in Denmark. Continue this.
I was also to conferences in Leicester after I have been there, and there I have been published in Cambio something in English about Norbert Elias. I should also make a project with Stephanie Ernst, but it was going wrong.
Okay.
But I was going my way, and I was especially with architecture and civilizations and what means room and space and time and performance, and in that way I go to the I would say the way of the body and the sensibility and psychoanalytic research. I also got education in group analytic educations in the way of the Fuchs tradition. So I was missing my own way of working with the things after the place where I have to get my money and bring.
Yeah, of course.
So it was also so doubled.
Yes, you needed to follow the curriculum.
I must do what they need in different institutions, but I also have the possibility to go my own way.
Yeah, I think it's a usual kind of teaching, that you have some curriculum brought to you by the institution, and then you mix your own thinking and the theories you adapt, and you integrated Norbert Elias into what you were doing. You did a lot on architecture, you have a psychoanalytical background. How did Norbert Elias mix into with other psychoanalytical backgrounds like Freud or other teachers you had in this field where you were very keen on?
Elias was very psychoanalytic orientated, but he was his own.
Yeah.
He was very inspired from Freud, the early Freud, from biological knowledge, and from the setting in the psychoanalytic approach, transfer against transfer. So this dynamic that are in the psychoanalytic way to communicate with people in groups and in one analytic. That was very a big part of his way to be in the world, and that was taking over the traditional psychoanalytical way of making theory or performance. He don't like. He had his own way to transform, especially the simple theory and the theory about time, the theory of involvement and detachment, and the more dimensions of how people are learning to use their own language and their own symbolization processes, not as behavior, but a way of transform affects and drives and so on. That was essential, the key about biological neuroscience and socialization and society. And that was the way he was bringing knowledge and movement and different form for symbolization into his work of symbol theory. That was the key.
Yeah.
And that was for many people difficult to follow that way because they want to have their own and in the Schubladen or way of working boxes and the statues that was grown fast. Die versteinerte Statuen and so it was always the way of using a process, going into the team, and when the world and the figuration was changing, you have to change the way you was going to know and look at the world and symbolize your way of looking.
Yeah.
But always was the human being with his drives, his biological potential, and his knowledge in different countries, French or the English or so. But it was always a way to make more complexity.
Yeah.
And not a Luhmann was make a reduction, but in the way that society was getting more complex and the diversity was changing, that was also the way you was working as sociologist on in the society where you were. You must learn not to see yourself as a Dane, as a German, or a Netherlander, Hollander. And he gave me one time an example. He asked a historian of Netherlands, Holland, Dutch, why he always was writing about America. Then the professor was saying, but the history of Holland is not interesting for the other people. America is a big country. Then Elias said to him, you shall learn to write about the Dutch tradition so a Dane and an American can understand it.
Yeah.
And
I think this is one of the great talents of Norbert Elias, that he saw not as a wrongdoing that he had practical experience or that you came from a smaller country, but he said, okay, you have an extremely interesting empirical set of knowledge you bring with yourself, which is not provincial or outsider knowledge, it's knowledge about a topic which could be used for identifying generalizations on humankind. Yes. And I think this is a huge challenge he brought with him.
Yes, and he was very interested in the practice.
Yeah.
For example, I have a future as electriker and electric engineer, and he was very interested how I was built my electronic models in the way I was working as an engineer that was designing machines that could make electronic work in fabrics. And there he was very interesting. And there he said, the way you are working with this technical, practical things is in many ways the same way I was working with my civilization process to make the synthesis between medicine and biology and society and philosophy. And for me it was electronic and power electricity and buildings and so there he saw a connection how the practical life was very important for the way you was knowledge the world. He also tell me how important the knowledge he had from the First World War was going to the way to drive sociology, where, for example, many of other professors they have got the education as sociologists or philosophy, but then they have no praxis. So it was also words and Bildung and so on. But Elias, it was also related to the practical world, where he also have been working with in fabrics as a young man, as there was no money from his parents. He was selling equipment in Sweden and in Denmark, and he had a job by a man in Breslau, I think. He had a fabric, and there he was telling me how much he had learned from this time of his life and tried to bring it over to sociology knowledge.
Yeah.
And that is what mostly sociologists not have, this knowledge.
Yeah.
Lorenzer had something because he was a medicine arts and had been in war, but I don't think that Jupp had always been a sociologist, and so on.
And he had his practical background.
He had his practical background.
But you're talking about electronics, and I think the life of Norbert Elias was, of course, the age of electrification.
Yes.
He in his childhood there was no electrical light, and in his youth for the first electric lights were established, and at the end of his life his last books were written on the computer.
Yes.
Now we are in the internet age. How did he transform this? He was writing on the French society in the Middle Ages. He was speaking about the Roman society, all this historical times, but actually he lived in a time during computerization. How did he adapt to this? How did this evolve into his thinking about sociology and society?
That's very strange because in the First World War, Elias was by a telegraph and bringing out the lines between the different grapes.
Yeah.
So he had always a practical figurations practice there. And later on, he was traveling around, and I was speaking with him about when he used time. He was seeing time first. You look at the sun. Then there was coming a watch on the church. And then we have industrialization, and then all people have a watch. There was individualization. So he had a knowledge of technical things going on the way the technique had developed in the years he was living, from phone, Edison, modernity, Chaplin, and Ford, and so on. And then he stopped by he have no really meaning about the digital time. So there we have a discussion because I have been working with the digital technology. So there he was very interesting to hear what it means with digital technology when you have a watch without movement but
blinking.
So all the things he was aware, but as he said, as I asked him one time about he speak the Hollandish language, he said, old dogs can't learn new tricks. So he was knowing that the digital way of look of the world was not his way.
Would you say that's up to us to develop further Norbert Elias, or would you say we should more or less keep this in mind? When he says, I'm an old dog, I'm not learning new things, is it he was aware about he could not do this by himself, but he was giving us the idea of continuing this.
That was the way he was saying that every new generation must learn to use the language and the knowledge and symbolize that from them. That only the human being, not the animals, can learn to make the old language and terms and theories. So he was interesting in that. He said to me, you don't have to make my theories static. You have to develop your own way to see of the world, so that will be the figurations that have the vitality, that every generation have their way to using terms to build models. He don't talk about theories, he talk about models.
What did he mean by models?
This, for example, I was developed the experience analysis. It's a synthesis between psychoanalytic research and culture research and Norbert Elias' figurations. So there we was making a new model. He showed it himself using this stairs model, and also he used the model from Poe, the Fischer.
Malmström.
So he always said, before we have the landscape, before we have the terms, we shall using models coming from different kind of seeing the world. There's not fixed in theories, but there must also be fixed in theories, so we have something wherefrom we can use new models. So he said that knowledge must go over institution and get proved in theories and models. He said Foucault had made many interesting things, but he had no theory. Only I have a theory. And that means that Foucault had a good view of configurations of architecture, but Elias had the model where it also was figurations, Startbildungsprozesse, and so on. So he was not against theory, but he was against a theory that was fixed.
Yeah, and I think it was more or less a method. Just to use the example with the staircase where you look on other people on the development. We have the opportunity to understand our current situation much better in the world, and we can adapt to a better living together, and the people in one generation apart can look back on us and can get a better model. So it's more this theory, as he called it, is more or less a method of knowledge adaptation. I would say
he used the term Fackelläufer.
Torchbearer, on English.
And that was it for him important. And
did we develop a method as humankind of continuing our research?
I remember once I was sitting and speaking with Erik, and Erik had made a book together with Elias. Was what the name, the excitement?
Question of excitement.
Excitement, and there had Erik used the word mythology. He said, no, don't use that word. I don't use that word. And then have you a method had Erik then asked Elias, and then I said, Elias said, I don't know about I have a method. But he had a way of working with problems that come to him in the world, but he had knowledge about philosophy, biology, architecture. He had a lot of knowledge because he was developed in a time where you go from different kind of knowledge. He had studied philosophy, psychology, Kunst, and so on. But he had no method.
Yes.
Geschlossene Methode. He had no mythology, but he learned from this different way to build symbols about the biology, the individuality, the Staatsbildung, and Marx. So he was always inspired from people that have been working in processes. And that was Darwin, and that was Copernicus, and that was Marx, and that was Freud. And he was very sorry when we are not thinking anymore in process. That was
society becoming static or analytic. He was totally opposing Tackle Parsons, for example.
Systematic, or Luhmann, or things like that. It always have that the men are changing in the history from there was a Buche and Peel and fire, and it was also the way there was ein Auseinandersetzung som gegebene Bedingungen. And every generation is making that with different habits and a different way of looking at the world, and different technology and different medicine knowledge and so on. So all this knowledge must be integrated in the way there was developed new models.
And you wouldn't say there's an end of the civilizing process.
There's no ending. There's a lower beginning. And he also said we are the late barbarians.
The late barbarians.
We are not the civilization. We are the end of the barbarians. But we must try to be civilized.
And it's a permanent challenge for each generation.
Yes.
The socializing process within the single individuum, and it's a civilizing process in the society, and the society relives the civilizing process every time again.
Yes, but because the mensch against the animals have a biological that can make change, and that can you see in your face. The animals have not the biological resources for change. Only the mensch.
How is last question? How is your outlook on the society? You're now in the age about you met Norbert Elias. You're an old man, so to say, and how do you think humankind is developing? In which direction? Do you have a positive and optimistic outlook on the world, or do you say, with all these challenges about AI, atomic threat, there's a bad outlook for our society? How do you think global society will develop in the next decades?
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Because when I open the television or I go to the university and I'm looking how the leaders are behaving them in the world, I get very pessimistic. But when I see my grandchildren, I get very optimistic.
Okay.
Because the way they are looking at the world, when they are here visiting me, then I'm very surprised how much they know, how much they see, and how good they are in communication. So I see that maybe we have some stupid leaders in Europe nowadays. We have some conform university, but the young people, I'm sure they will find a way. As my little granddaughter said, Aya, she's half from my son in Denmark, and his mother is coming from Somalia. She's very beautiful. She looked at me, and we understand each other. And she said, Grandpa, you can use the eyes for two things. You can look with them, and you can speak with them. And when he said, I said, that was very clever. But she can speak with his eyes, because when I have problems with or discussions in words with my son, she look at me in the way so he can speak with her eyes. So all this informalization, all this potential Elias was speaking about by the human being, I can see in the next generation, but not many in my own generation. They have going after macht positions. They are dead. They died very early. But the people that was living like Elias and what I'm taking over, I have the feeling we are still going strong, and we can still speak with the children. And I can speak with Aya when she here come, or my children that's coming from Greenland. I can play with them, and when we look at each other, even when they're only 6 months, we have a communication.
They find their own way.
And look at me, and when I laugh to them, they laugh to me, and when I see them again, I can speak with them. And when they are in Greenland, we are doing it over the internet. They said they're coming, my grandson there. Look, is very happy when they and therefore we have, when we are still alive, a communication, and that is the way Elias was understanding communication between people. It was not on the university, it was against the static, but for the living people in nature and the next generation, and how we speak with all people in the way. He said to me, yes, many people think they can learn about the world on the university, but you also learn about the world when you are going to the restaurant. We are the same people. So the communication was always going on in a living communication in the situation with the people you were, and you was transforming knowledge from one generation to the next one without saying how they should do it, but showing them a different way to symbolize themselves.
Awesome.
Without power.
Awesome.
That's the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.